What's going on? It is Vlogmas day 5. Still can't believe I'm making a video every day because I pretty much made a video a month, maybe every 2 months before this. But we're keeping it going and we're doing more of a vlog style video here to start it off. Just got back from the gym, and for this one I'm going to do non-disc golf related, but something I actually got into right around the time I started getting really into disc golf, which is board games. And I think there's a decent amount of overlap between board games and the disc golf community. So I have a bunch right here, and I'm going to list off of that bunch my top 5, and I'm going to give a couple honorable mentions as well. Okay, quick, I'm going to zip through 3 honorable mentions. So honorable mention number 1 is Bonanza. This is one of the first games I ever bought, and still to this day it's one of my favorites. A lot of my family members love playing this game, and it's really easy to bring with you, super compact, and super easy to teach. All it is you have these bean fields and beans, and you are basically bartering with each other to trade beans. You have a handful of them, but you have to play them in order, and the beans have to line up on the field, so you have to have the same in each field. So it's all about maintaining your hand, your fields, and trying to trade with people so that things come out of your hand in the right order. Honorable mention number 2 is Splendor. This is another easy game to teach. I'd say even easier than Bonanza, and this one I've gotten more recently. Ellie and I have a ton of experience playing this 2-player. I've played it 3-player, 4-player. It works best in all settings, and I've heard that some of the expansions are pretty good, although I don't have them. Basically, all you do is get these coins right here and use them to buy these cards, which then will give you access to resources on the cards, which will eventually allow you to buy more cards, which will give you more resources and points. And you can also buy these guys, which I think are called nobles, I can't remember, which you can have when you have certain amounts of a resource, which also give you points, and you want to be the first to 15 points. Super good for teaching people who are just getting into modern board games or haven't played before. I'd say even easier than something like Catan, because it's fast to teach and really fast to learn. And last but not least, honorable mention number 3 is Dominion. I only got this one recently, but it's quickly becoming one of my favorites. It's a great deck building game. There are these randomizer cards. So you have all of these cards here in the box, and each of them can be played in the game, generally, except for the cards that are played in every single game. And you have these blue bordered randomizer cards right here. So what you do is shuffle this deck up and pick 10 of them, and those are the cards you're going to play with. So pretty much every time, you get a unique order of cards that you're going to be playing with. And as you add expansions, it increases the number of games that you can have played, and you can mix and match however you want to have different styles of games. On its own, the base game stands up pretty well in terms of replayability. You can get expansions, but I'd highly recommend playing the base game a handful of times until you feel like you've seen enough combinations that you've kind of exhausted most of the things you're going to see, and then you can think about getting expansions. The 2 expansions I've got, one I've heard recommended the most, and I would also recommend them, are Seaside and Prosperity. They both add pretty interesting mechanics to the game and allow you to mix and match quite a bit before you even have to think about adding a 3rd expansion. Alright, on to my top 5 games that I own. These are games that I've played quite a bit and have pretty strong opinions on. Obviously they'll probably change over time, but as it stands right now, these are my favorite ones. And the order is not super specific. They might be a little wiggle room on where I'd put ones, but generally I would say this is the order from my bottom to top for top 5. Number 5 is Codenames. Codenames is a fantastic game. It is the perfect party game for really any group that you have with 4 or more players. So the way the game works is you have a 5x5 grid in front of you for both teams of cards with just words on them. And the way the game works is you have one representative from each team who is going to see another 5x5 grid that's going to have red, blue, gray, or a 1 black, which is the assassin, which is like the don't choose this or you lose the game instantly card. And that's going to correspond with the 5x5 grid they're seeing. They're going to give clues to try to get their team to tap the words that correspond with the grid that they're seeing for their team, so whether the red team or the blue team. And the way they give the clues is just say a single word and then a number after, and your team then has to, without getting any more information from you, try to decipher what that means and then pick the ones that they think it corresponds with. This game has a ton of replayability. Just with the cards, I don't know if there's expansions for it or not, but just with the cards that came with it, I've been able to play this game a ton of times. As long as you shuffle them up good, you're going to get all different types of combinations. With that, you also have tons of different options for layouts for the 5x5 grid for which team is which cards. It's great to try and get to know things about certain people depending on what your team is and who knows who and who knows what. You can get lots of interesting clues and have a lot of fun playing this over and over. Number 4 is Terraforming Mars. If you are into more dense board games, you probably know about this game, but if you don't, I'll try to explain it a little bit, although it is complicated. What you're trying to do is terraform Mars. So you have Mars, which you're trying to increase the heat of, or increase the temperature of, increase the oxygen level, and add ocean tiles to, or add water to try to populate it. You're also going to add things like cities and grass areas to try to terraform the planet while building up your engine as you build it up as this corporation to try to get the most money, the most resources, and ultimately the most victory points to eventually win the game. There are a handful of expansions you can add. I highly recommend the Prelude expansion because it speeds the early game up quite a bit, which can be a little bit slow. And the other map expansions can also mix things up a little bit as well. Oh, I'm ruining my stack of games. Alright, number 3, and if you couldn't tell already, all the games that I'm picking out have the most wear on the box because I played them the most, is Seven Wonders. I'd say this game is a notch above Splendor for teaching people new modern board games, people who haven't had a lot of experience with games like this. This is another deck builder where you're picking from a limited number of cards and then passing them to the person next to you. You have a bunch of different ways to get points, but you're trying to build up your wonder and get points by going into science, military, or various other paths to try to get the most points faster than everybody else. It's not the most interactive game, but there are some ways you can interact with each other, like military, and some of the expansions will add ways to team up or interact with other people in ways that the base game doesn't. So after you've played this a decent amount, I'd recommend picking up some expansions. The 2 that I have are Cities and Leaders, and I think those are generally recommended as the best first 2 expansions to use. Alright, game number 2, and this is probably the newest in my top 5. This is Blood on the Clock Tower. This game I just got pretty recently from a Kickstarter. I think it's available to just buy now. You don't have to get it on Kickstarter anymore. I don't know if it's in shelves in stores yet, but you should be able to get it. There's not much to show by opening it, but this game is kind of like Mafia or Werewolf meets D&D. Let me explain. You have one person that is the storyteller, and they're going to facilitate the entire game. And because you have this storyteller, which is very similar to like a DM, you are able to allow people to give and take a lot more information than you would in a traditional game that is similar to this, like Mafia. Each person has a role, whether good or bad, that gives them some sort of ability that they can influence the game. So instead of having the normal Mafia or Avalon Resistance game where a lot of people are either just evil minions or innocent townfolk where they're really not influencing the game much other than just talking and speculating, everyone has some bit of information or some way to influence the game, and even when you die, you can continue to talk and influence the game. So I think this game is probably the best social deduction game I've played. It has a decent barrier for entry. You need a decent amount of people to be able to play it successfully, and you need to have someone who's willing to be a storyteller, and it is a bit longer than the other games. But if you can get past all of those things, this is by far, in my opinion, the best social deduction game you can play. However, if this is a bit too heavy for you, I would recommend Avalon, as Avalon is a lot easier, has a little bit of characters with abilities, and has a decent amount of replay value, even though it's a lot more limited. And my number 1 favorite game that I own is Spirit Island. Spirit Island is a cooperative game where each of you and your friends are playing as a spirit that is sort of haunting lands that are being colonized by outside invaders. They're coming in and invading your lands and building towns and cities and sort of destroying all of the natural forest and nature and getting rid of all of the the people that live there, which are called the Dahan, which I think I'm pronouncing right. At least that's how I've always pronounced it. The game is asymmetrical, so each spirit has different abilities and different ways to influence the game. You influence a board, which is a bunch of different islands basically that are all joined together that you and your fellow spirits are going to influence and try to ward off these invaders. It's a pretty difficult game, and even on the lowest difficulty that the game recommends you start with, it's not easy, and you can up the difficulty quite a bit as you get better at it. There's lots of expansions. I own pretty much all of them. There's tons of different spirits you can play as you add expansions, and then as you add the expansions, you also get things like new adversaries to play against, which are just things that make it more difficult to play against, different scenarios which change kind of the rules of the game a little bit, and you can also add things like events, different types of pieces you can put on the board. There's a ton of things that are put into this game. It all blends together beautifully, and I think that this is a game that you could play endlessly. It's kind of complicated. That's probably the one downside, but it is complicated in a good way in that you're playing cooperatively, but you each are working on the game individually rather than having one person who knows everything and is just telling everyone what to do. There's so much information that you can't possibly be micromanaging everyone else around you. You have to work on just your spirit and your board and what you're doing and try your best to communicate and cooperate with everybody else. But it's very difficult to sort of backseat game someone next to you. You have to really focus on what you're doing. So that's my top 5 board games that I own, that I've played so far, with a couple of extras in there. I hope you enjoyed. I hope maybe someone learned something new. Highly recommend getting any of these games and checking them out. And let me know if there's any board games that you think I would like based on what I said or just based on you liking them. So I'll see you next time for the next Vlogmas, which is tomorrow, which is going to be day 6. Hope you enjoyed the video, and peace.